As Russia's war against Ukraine rages on, President Zelensky has expressed the need for a no-fly zone above Ukraine to keep his people safe.
And according to a new poll, Americans agree with him. A whopping 74% of those surveyed say the U.S. and NATO should implement the no-fly zone above Ukraine. But it's quite possible Americans may not understand the implications of a decision like this.
And Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Marco Rubio, laid it out plainly on ABC this week.
But I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means. It's not some rule you pass that everybody has to oblige by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III.
The beginning of World War III. Well, joining us now is retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations Major Glenn Ignazio. Major, thanks for joining us tonight. Now, in that same poll, 61% say that they don't support sending American troops to Ukraine. Do you think they realize that's basically what will happen if we implement the no-fly zone?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about no-fly zone. I mean, most times people remember what happened in Iraq. And the no-fly zone was to prevent Saddam Hussein from attacking the Kurds in the north and the south. And if aircraft, helicopters came in, we would shoot them down. So yes, it could be a trigger to war.
Glenn, there has been reports of Russia recruiting militants from foreign countries like Syria to come and fight with them. They've had let me tell you, Putin has had a really rough time trying to really get his troops on the ground to have significant effect here in these regions. But they also haven't been able to control the airspace yet. Are the Russians just trying to hide their weak spots?
Yes, it is very interesting. And this question does exist with a lot of us, is that, the Russian Air Force is a very formidable force and they have a lot of numbers. So why haven't they thrown their max effort of aircraft and their max crack troops in? You see a lot of the conscripts that have been on TV and so forth. So the question is why? So if they're pulling up forces from other countries, you have to question, are they even trained? Now, the reason why this is, concerning is he has 1 million soldiers in his army right now with 3 million in reserve. So why is he recruiting? I can see people flooding to Ukraine to help out Ukraine because, again, they only have about 500,000, half and half of active and reserves. But I don't understand why Russia would do that, considering the amount of forces that they have.
Major, today the Pentagon, they addressed that Russian truck convoy that's headed towards Kyiv. Press Secretary John Kirby said that it's been stalled for days. It was most likely a resupply convoy. There's videos like this popping up on social media showing these abandoned Russian military trucks full of supplies. Do you think that this perhaps is part of Russia's strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest part, as we mentioned before, is, with bombing and attacks, you can, wipe out certain forces in the country, but you have to occupy to take it over. And we know that the oil reserves and the oil pipelines are something of great value and great value to Putin. But the interesting part to do that is you have to occupy. So this convoy has been sitting there for a while, and people have been talking about destroying the whole convoy. And my question is if there's supplies and there's weapons in there, then Ukrainian military should try to take those supplies and attack the convoy in such a way. But, so just being able to wipe them out would wipe out supplies. Why is this stalled and been sitting there for a while? It hasn't really been a contested area. It's been an area that the Russian forces have been able to hold. But it is concerning why they've been stuck. Now, you have to watch it. Is in about 30 to 45 days, there's a phrase they say, the country without roads. The thaw's going to start, and all these roads in rural areas are going to be nothing but mud. So you're going to see a lot of bogged down equipment, tanks, and other vehicles that are going to get caught. And that's on both sides. So it is concerning. And if Putin wants to move, he wants to move now.
Glenn, we've got about a minute. Ukraine's ambassador today, they sent a letter to the United States asking lawmakers for more funding for aircraft and air defense systems. John Kirby says the Pentagon is sending refueling aircrafts and air defense personnel to NATO's eastern flank. So not directly to Ukraine. Do you think this is what the ambassador was asking for?
Yeah, I think it needs to be. We talked about it the other day that, the Russian block aircraft is what Ukraine flies, and there's not really any there. Our NATO countries would be left emptied if we sent them that. But the idea of supplying any kind of weapons and particular supplies that are needed directly into Ukraine is important. The other thing is we keep on talking about NATO versus Russia. we did this in Iraq, and this is something that can be done now, is what about a coalition of countries that include non-NATO countries and being able to take action off of that? We haven't talked about that, and I haven't heard it. That includes being able to provide options and strike options within Ukraine if it's an international, not just NATO against Russia type of activity. Interesting.
That is interesting. I'd be curious to see if the Biden administration would even entertain such a concept of an international coalition outside of NATO. To me, it doesn't seem they're going to move in that direction. Major Glenn Ignazio, thank you for your expertise tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Call anytime for these critical items.
Absolutely.